Hi, everyone. Welcome. Maryssa Mitsch here from San Francisco State Department of Special Education in the Early Childhood Special Education Program. And I am here with Eileen Cristobal-Rodriguez. We are so excited for you to be here, Eileen. Welcome.
Hello, fellow SFSUers.
Yeah, Eileen is an alumni. So we're so excited for you to be here and just share your wisdom, talk a little bit about what you're doing in your classroom, what you're doing in the work with your families. And we're just really grateful and appreciative that you're taking some time to kind of share some of your wisdom with us. So thank you. Thank you.
No, of course. I'm happy to pay it forward. I'm here by token of just the program I went through in SFSU, got my master's degree at SFSU, have a lot of mentors there to thank. I basically got a free ride and through my master's program and my credentialing program because, SFSU just does like a great job of really putting some programs out there, really trying to enable those trying to get out into the ECSE field, the special education field, and really empower us to stay in the field because we know we have some difficulties and some challenges with teacher retention in these respective fields. And so part of my way of sort of paying it forward and paying it back is to, speak about something I'm already deeply passionate about already anyways.
Yeah, which is so awesome. We're grateful that you're paying it forward or paying it back. Yeah, it's a great that when students get support financially to be able to go through the program, but we know it's like more than that. It's like that early childhood community, right? That is in, and something that we really try to support and kind of feed and bring people into our community. So yeah, thanks for being here. My lights keep going off, so I might just leave them off. We have some natural light coming through.
We do. You got natural lighting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so you kind of talked a little bit about your background, but can you share a bit more about kind of some of the work that you're doing or anything that kind of inspired you to go in the field in the first place?
Yeah, so I started
two different directions. But
yeah, no, I started off, it's funny because I actually really early on when I was going to school, I was going go into finance, believe it or not. And, happened upon a flyer that allowed me to work with a kiddo. Didn't know the kiddo was a child who was under the spectrum, the autism spectrum. So I started off my professional career as a behavior therapist working in home. And part of, being a behavior therapist is you're coming into the home, you're working with families, but then you're also coming into the classroom and you're getting to kind of either be like a one-on-one aid or supporting that student in the classroom setting. I fell in love with the classroom dynamic. I don't know if it's sort of like an undiagnosed ADHD in me, but I just love the pacing that comes in a classroom setting. And so I love that dynamic of how just nicely it flowed. So decided I wanted to become a teacher, applied in San Francisco State, just have been in the field now for the past, 18 years. So I've been teaching in special ed now for 18 years. I'm currently actually teaching in the Bay Area. I teach in Union City, New Haven Unified School District. I am a special education teacher by training, but I teach in inclusion in transitional kindergarten inclusion. So I support students with special needs with IEPs within the general ed environment. I love it. Very, very passionate about making sure our kiddos are included. And, I think what I love about being in this field and why I stay in it, part of it is driven by just a lot of the humility I had when I was working with my professors in San Francisco State. I just, I can name off names right now, but, there was just a number of professors I had at San Francisco State with all their brilliance, with all their intelligence, with all their expertise, were so incredibly humble in how they approached learning. They themselves presented themselves as students kind of learning with us. And I just wanted to always inhabit that humility. And so I think what's nice when you're in the field and you kind of latch on to the right kind of people, it's that humility that your mentors, your master teachers will give to you that enables you and kind of invigorates you to kind of stay in the field. And I think that's what I've had. Now that I get an opportunity to kind of be quote unquote master teacher or mentor teacher, just because of how many years I've been in the field, I get to kind of spread my reach outside of just the classroom and work with teachers and collaborate with teachers and enable them to implement what I know because of the people before me who did that for me. I also love the idea of working in like this transdisciplinary model of delivery of services, working with speech therapists, working with social workers and counselors and school psychologists, and just having the humility again to, wow, this is your lane. You know speech and language therapy, occupational therapy, and learning from those people. So I think it's just that constant love of learning that kind of keeps me in the field, that keeps things interesting. I love to learn. I mean, if I could, I would be a forever student like you guys, if I could.
Yeah.
Right now.
We definitely talk about that. Like, I think it's really hard to be in the field and not embody the lifelong learning perspective, because you're going out into different programs, classrooms, just kind of like changes and things depending on the setting that you're in or the program, the district. People are going to have different changes likely throughout their career. And so they're going to have to pick up new skills, and they're going to have to support other people. And so the collaboration and work with other professionals is really important through that disciplinary training and gaining expertise from people. You're like, hey, you are an expert in this. Like, tell me more. What can I pick up? What can I do to support this child or this family is really important.
I mean, absolutely. I think it's really about humility. I think once you get to a point in your career, and this is not just unique to education, but once you get to a point of career where you can get complacent and you think you know everything, you probably need a shift. And so you need to I agree with you. You have to be in that mindset of wanting to learn, wanting to be that lifelong learner, because there are people who do know more than you.
Yes.
And who can provide some insight. Younger, older, doesn't matter. I've learned it's definitely not like an age thing or not necessarily an experience thing. There's definitely what, different people from different backgrounds can kind of bring.
Exactly. Yeah. And having different perspectives is so important too, whether in classes, programs, just learning from people around you, because there's always something that you can learn and take away from interactions and, working with others. So I really like how you're highlighting the collaboration aspect and then the humility that's sort of needed in the work and your approach to the work.
Yes.
Yeah. It's funny, going back to what you kind of said initially, is I actually started my journey into special education also as an at-home therapist.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, do you miss it?
No, not really. I mean, I'm still in touch with the family and the child. He's, grown now, but my journey started as an elementary education major. So I always kind of thought I would be an elementary teacher, maybe eventually go into school leadership or some sort of other path kind of that way. And then I kind of, I wouldn't say a U-turn, took a pivot into special education and then early childhood. So.
Well, there's something about early childhood, right, where you get to be in there first, right? Yeah. You get to kind of be in there before the waters get tainted by someone else before you. So early intervention is just key.
Mm-hmm. It is. And like oftentimes the family's like first interaction or experience with schooling or education or development. And so like you're the face of what they're going to experience hopefully in the future. So you got to put on, a face that has like humility and collaboration and, hey, I want to get to know you and your family and like, how can I further support? So that's important.
Completely agree. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you've talked a little bit about, families and working with them in different capacities, as well as collaboration. Can you tell us a little bit more about sort of your work with families, parents, guardians, with some of your social emotional learning stuff that you do or anything else?
Yeah. So, one thing that's really big on me, and I only was able to cultivate sort of just through my experience. I think I've always been, even from just my education in San Francisco State, there was a big emphasis when I was going to school for around family-centered practices. I don't know what it's called now, but I'm guessing that's still the term, but it was really focused on family-centered practices. And I think when you go out there into the field and you're there with the families, I think one thing to keep in mind that I try to always just keep in the back of my mind, because I hear it a lot, especially when I facilitate trainings, because I'm a trainer as well, is I think the shift has moved from blaming parents and seeing parents as the source of problems that exist with their students with or without special needs. There was a tendency pretty early on in my career to say oh, these parents, they're constantly outsourcing problems or outsourcing, their kids' needs into like these different therapies, and the parents give them too much screen time. The parents do too much of this. And I never really bought into that. I will say that pretty early in my career, I at least had the humility to say, like, you know what, I'm not a parent. I wasn't a parent yet at the time. So I don't know what it's like to be in these parents' shoes. Sorry, I apologize.
It's okay. It's real life. That's what happens.
I already came in with that mentality, but that being said, I'm glad that the shift is moving with with our perception of families, that we're not faulting them, we're not blaming them. It's really hard to be a parent. It's really hard to be a parent and be a working parent. So the one thing I always keep in mind about our families is they need the education. They want to work with teachers. They want to do right by their kid. And so I think one thing that's really important to me in sort of my practice is to create opportunities, parent workshops, parent education meetings, where I'm kind of just giving them like little how-tos. You'd be surprised. I mean, if you're talking to like an engineer, or if you're talking to a doctor, a doctor is hopefully going to explain some kind of condition in layman's terms. I think when I go to like an IEP meeting, it surprises me still how many professionals still continue to use jargon like IEP, ADHD, and throw those terms so loosely, like parents immediately know what that means. STC, SLP, all the acronyms.
We love the acronyms and we love the jargon. We do.
And so I think one thing that's really important for me, and it's not to say that I'm working with engineers, I'm working with parents who are doctors and who are clearly educated, is it's not their field, right? We can dissect educational jargon because our brains are trained as such to kind of process that jargon. So I really try to explain things in terms to our families in a way that's accessible to them. I also keep in mind that when I'm trying to promote any sort of practices or things they could do at home, I like to use this word a lot, doable doses, right? Like, I'm not going to expect my parents to implement my curriculum or implement the way I teach, but I am going to say, hey, these are some things globally you can do. And so like Maryssa, you had talked about like social emotional learning, which again is another passion of mine. I use the Kimochis curriculum, which you kind of see behind me. I just came from a Kimochis training that I facilitated earlier. But I'm certainly not going to teach my parents, oh, this is this character, and this character teaches this tool. I mean, I may, depending on how invested they want to be, but at the root of it, what do I want my families to do? I want them to talk about feelings. I want them to be open about the discussion of feelings, because there's still a lot of recalibrating we have to do with parents, with kiddos, with teachers, with colleagues, about what our perceptions are around feelings, that I need to kind of bring it down to a level where they can understand. I try to facilitate games that they can do that isn't like, hey, read this handout that I gave to you and implement these strategies. But I say, hey, let's play a feelings game. Let's do feeling charades. When you're reading this book, when I'm doing like a joint reading activity with you, what are some feelings you see in this book? Because oftentimes we'll read a book and we'll say, what's that? Or what color is it? Or who's this? What are they doing? And you'll inundate them with the WH questions, with maybe like, I wonder what's happening here. Look at that person's face, or look at that character's face. Looks like they're frustrated. Why do you think they're frustrated? And like having like this organic discussion around it.
Yeah, because I think a lot of times family members don't know exactly what to say. And so they kind of find themselves repeating. And I think, even for adults, sometimes like it gets repetitive after a while. And so they kind of start to check out. But, kids love repetition, and we know repetition is really good for learning. And so if they can utilize some of those social emotional strategies and like talk about, identifying feelings and looking at facial expressions, and like, those are all social cues that are really important and can, generalize to real life too. Like, oh, so-and-so at school today, was really upset. And, that can be a conversation of like, remember we were reading that book and, so-and-so was upset. Like there's ways that you can kind of connect, or model for families sort of, these are how you can connect at-home conversations and at-home literature with what's happening in the classroom. And like you said, the kind of going through naming characters in terms of what they're doing, how they're feeling, why they might be feeling that way, maybe some like problem solving or like solution, right?
Yeah, and then embedding it into their naturally occurring routines. I mean, what tends to happen, this is why I'm not, I mean, sorry, I'm a teacher, but
we talk about embedded learning opportunities and working things into your routines all the time. So
yeah, I mean, what gets me about homework is, because my child's in kindergarten, don't even get me started on kindergarten, but what gets me about kindergarten is like, okay, you're doing these activities and it's obviously, quote unquote, carrying over the learning from school, but it's not natural, right? I have to carve out time to say, I'm going to sit with you, do this worksheet, and we're going to write numbers or whatever. I like for, hopefully people who go out into the field for, really teachers to say, hey, this is what's naturally occurring in your life. You probably read books to your child, which hopefully you are. It's a great activity you could do. Let's just, facilitate some language. Let's facilitate discussion of feelings while we're reading this book. You're watching Encanto for the 20th time, this week. Why don't I pause at this specific section and say, hey, I wonder what's happening here. What feelings do you see in here, Maryssa? And, again, don't do it the first time when maybe they're watching Encanto, but maybe if they're watching it for the 100th time, like they'll probably tolerate you pausing. But those are naturally occurring things when you're watching a TV show like Bluey or Cocomelon, whatever. Those are things that parents are already naturally doing with their students, right? And so I don't want it to be something that they have to do extra because they're busy, they're working, like even if it's like I'm cooking, I'm in the kitchen, or I'm doing something like, can you tell me what kind of face mommy's showing? Yeah. And we do like a little feeling charades, like, can you guess what mommy's doing? And then I would reference like a little feelings poster, which I know you're passing on to your students as a resource.
Yeah, that sounds like a very doable dose to be able to do a lot of those things at home, like embedded with like what they're already doing. Because families, everyone's really busy. So how can they do a doable dose like here or there and talk about feelings and emotions and kind of facilitate some of those conversations and questions. Yeah. And I think that helps parents too, just like be more in touch or more in tune with how kids are reacting. And of course, with like using Encanto or Bluey or Cocomelon or these things that kids really enjoy or like, they're going to be more interested in it, and that's going to kind of keep them coming back for more conversations. So all great strategies. Yeah.
I mean, that's what I highly recommend for our families, because again, I think we have to keep in mind that I'm now a mommy, and it's challenging. The juggling act is real. It's not always going to be this Instagram picture perfect, like, look how great my family life is.
Yeah.
Real life is not like that.
No, so not at all. Not at all.
In mind. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So can you talk a little bit more about Kimochis a bit?
Yeah, so behind me, Kimochis is a social emotional learning curriculum that I use. I've been using it now for the past 10, 11 years in my practice. And so it's basically a program that the overall mantra it teaches is it really calibrates our brains, everyone's brains, around the fact that all behaviors are okay. All feelings are okay, but not all behaviors are okay. So we really want to recalibrate our students' brains around the stigma or the perceptions around like some of the negative feelings like mad and frustrated and disappointed. The program is really great at facilitating increasing students' emotional vocabulary, because a lot of our students are a lot of our itty bitties who are coming out into school are only starting off with 3 basic words: happy, mad, and sad. And so we're increasing, sort of the emotional vocabulary so they get the nuances of emotions. And then, if you look at the characters behind me, these characters all sort of inhabit these different temperaments, these different personalities, and it really teaches, it really facilitates our learning of not everyone's going to be best friends. We're not going to all like want to play with each other, but you are going to learn to treat each other with respect. You are going to learn to treat each other with compassion. And so I've been doing it now in inclusive settings now for, again, the past 10 to 12 years. It always amazes me, especially when you have students with IEPs who are, maybe 4 or 5 chronologically, but maybe functioning at a 2-year or 24-month level. and they're coming out with emotional vocabulary like left out, and they can tie a cause to left out, or I feel disappointed, because those are emotions we're already experienced easily before your first year. I mean, a year old, before you even able to express it. So it always amazes me, the sort of the outcomes we see when I don't have like IEPs around, or IEP goals centered around Kimochis, but I always say whenever I go to like a back to school night or an open house, if for anything, my students come out as socially, emotionally competent, confident, and believe in themselves, I've already done my job as an educator.
Yeah. And that's a lot of the work that we do in early childhood for sure. Is setting that good foundation for them to be able to feel confident in themselves and be able to advocate for themselves. Because if they're able to express themselves, using different vocabulary, I think there's a stronger likelihood of developing friendships, and being in a classroom where they feel kind of supported and can tell a teacher or tell a peer when they're upset, sad, frustrated, left out, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you think about like, and like, something as basic as, the whole notion that feelings are going to drive behavior, right? So if you have a child who's being quote unquote disruptive in the classroom, it's usually fueled by something that they're feeling at that time. I think sometimes what happens to us teachers is we tend to take it personal because we want to please, we want to entertain. And so when our kids are coming in upset, or they're crying, or they're sad, or they're disruptive, we kind of take it personal and say, what are we doing? Are we not entertaining? Are we not engaging you enough? Yeah. And I try to remind educators to give themselves that grace of maybe what's happening to your student is outside of you, and to kind of give yourself that grace and allow them that grace as well, and remind them that, you are here to help. You're really establishing, again, what the beauty of early intervention is, sometimes you are the first go outside of the home setting where you are that trusted adult. And so I really try to encourage our, educators I train in this to really massage and nurture that relationship, because it's a big one. I actually shared this anecdote today where I had a 6-year-old in a first grade classroom. I was sort of pushing in and doing a Kimochis lesson. They had shared with this child had shared with the class, sometimes when my daddy gets mad, he hits me. And I think everyone in the classroom was sort of stunned when that was shared. Obviously, we needed to sort of investigate this a little more. I mean, I was pushing in and sort of helping a colleague of mine. And so, I acknowledged the group. I acknowledged him in the middle in the class. And I said, thank you, Jay, the acronym Jay, for sharing that story. Do you mind if, Miss Miranda and I sort of talk to you a little later? And so we did. Found out that, Jay was part of an abusive household, and was part of an abusive household that warranted us calling CPS, Child Protective Services. So, Miss Miranda comes back to me, my colleague comes back to me and says, Eileen, I really need you to come back in. I felt like we didn't finish it, or not necessarily finish it, but we didn't tie up, some loose ends there. So I had to come back and sort of talk with the group. Jay was still part of the group at the time too. Well, we were going through all of this. This is where that transdisciplinary model comes into play. I told Miss Miranda, recommended you need to bring in other people into this. This is sort of out of our scope. So we had to involve social workers. We had to involve counselors. We had to invite school psychologists, the principal. Everyone needs to get involved. It takes a village because this is out of our scope. And so you're going to need that support. But the follow-up conversation with the class was, I want to remind you guys that, one of the big things we teach in Kimochis is, yes, it's okay to be mad, but it's never okay to be mean. And so, that's it, that applies to adults as well, that it's okay for someone, for mom or dad or grandpa or grandma to be mad, but it's never okay for them to be mean and hurt you. It's never okay for them to be mean and hit you. And, Jay was sort of crying, sort of silently crying, sort of in the back. And, again, we always kind of kept in touch, and we always stayed in touch with him. But what made me realize sort of in my reflection of it and how all of it went down was, for him, a 6-year-old, and the hairs on my arms are sort of raising as I'm saying this. For him, it was normal to be part of this abusive household, meaning it was normal that when someone gets mad, he's going to get hurt. It was normal that if someone was mad at him, he was going to get hurt. And he didn't realize until coming into school that that was not okay behavior. That was not acceptable behavior. It was the first time he was hearing from an adult outside of home that this is not acceptable. And so, I always tell like trainees or teachers out there in the field that, that's sort of the occupational hazard you have as a teacher, that when you open the floodgates to emotions and talking about emotions, you might, uncover some trauma. You might uncover some things you don't hope to see in your settings, but necessary things you need to see in order to really support the child. And, again, I don't know where things kind of got left. It was several years ago when I pushed into this classroom. So I did kind of stay in touch, but not as frequently as I would like. But just really conveying to our students, especially being the first ones there, about the importance of, what's okay and what's not okay, what's limited.
Yeah, that's a pretty touching story. And I feel like it's so important that Jay, had adults around him to be able to be open and actually circle back to that conversation. Because you had kind of said like things were, kind of loosely they were loosely tied or like didn't really like tie together. And so it was brave of all of you to have that conversation with the whole class, because, there's a chance that there's other kids in that class who have something else very similar happening at home, either with them or siblings or, their parent, guardian. And so it's important for everyone. And, whether Jay at that age or when they're older or other kids, they might not come and tell an adult or be vulnerable to share that in a large group. They might tell a peer instead. And so by having those conversations, that's good for all the kids to be able to like kind of advocate and share and be that like safe space, hopefully for friends to talk to about kind of stuff like that. So starting young, it's like kind of, it's sad, and developmentally appropriate, like you did it in a very, great way, but it's like kind of hard. How do you have that conversation with like, a 5-6-year-old, but you need to, because it's happening.
Yeah. And you're laying the groundwork, right? Whether, whether he'll understand, abuse and sort of the ramifications of having been part of an abusive household. One of the things we talk a lot about Kimochis, in Kimochis, and sometimes I've gathered from some phenomenal trainees I've had, was just how Kimochis sort of teaches the importance of like consent and what's crossing a boundary and like the ramifications for them. Like, oh my gosh, like you guys have some complex thinking when it comes to this stuff. But all these things we teach that we think are like really simple, like this is how you navigate preschool world, this is how you navigate like elementary world, but have sort of like long-standing effects because you're laying that groundwork. And that's why early intervention is important.
Yeah, it's really that foundation. And then each year, each stage kind of builds a little bit more on it, as they develop and as they have more experiences and stuff like that. So that's really, really important. So thanks for sharing that with us.
Yeah. No, thank you. I mean, I think it's helpful, especially when your educators potentially going out there into the field, to hear these anecdotes from teachers. To hear these anecdotes from teachers. I mean, the one thing I take from just my experience is just to kind of share those stories, because it helps kind of provide some comfort. I mean, I really get annoyed when teachers are not as gracious and they feel like they have some ownership over things that they create when it's just about us recreating the wheel.
Yeah.
Time.
No, exactly. And it's important to have that kind of information. So for people who are in the field, kind of know maybe how others have navigated it, right? Or for people who want to go into the fields, like, okay, these are some like challenges, or these are some conversations of what like the daily work looks like, for kids. And so that's really important.
Yeah.
So are you using Kimochis like all day, every day in programs or classrooms, or like bits and pieces here? Like, what does that look like?
I facilitate the trainings. I do it every day, but I'm a firm believer that, especially when I'm facilitating these trainings, is you're your own classroom manager. You decide, what's going on in your classroom. So how frequently you do it, how comfortable you are doing it. I say if everyone just touches a little bit on feelings, not necessarily Kimochis, but social emotional learning, where you're doing a check-in in the beginning of the day, You're maybe doing a check-in in the middle of the day, and then you're doing a reflection at your end of the day. See, what tends to happen in the classroom is we do the feelings check-in, like, how are you feeling today? And it's always something as you're doing as you're walking into the classroom, right? But as you know, when you're walking into a classroom, you might start off pumped up, charged, ready to go. And as teachers, you'll end the day exasperated, tired, fatigued, maybe, relieved, whatever. But the feelings are not static, they're dynamic. They change sort of over the course of a day, over the course of a moment. And so I love the complexity of teaching mixed feelings that happen throughout the day, and the fact that feelings may change. And so I like to do it quite often within the day. I mean, like, I'm kind of known as the Kimochis lady at my school, which is a compliment. It's a compliment.
Yeah, of course.
But again, I really like to leave that up to those in the field, in their respective classrooms, to decide how often that happens. There's some people who think, unfortunately, and hopefully, you don't try to align too much, but, I'm not faulting, it's just different. But just some people who think it's a hokey, a little, too touchy-feely for me, and just don't have any comfort. I mean, the one thing I do say is just recognize where you are. And if it's not something you're comfortable with, then maybe you'll have to outsource it to someone who might be more comfortable with it. Like, your speech language pathologist, or your principal, or your social workers, or counselors. I know sometimes teachers who feel like their days are so busy, how can they fit SEL in? They like to, have their kids go to friendship groups with the counselor or something like that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, outsourcing it if you don't feel comfortable, because in early childhood, you need to get comfortable, or early intervention, you got to get comfortable, right? Like, you're on the ground with them, getting dirty, and, talking about emotions and feelings. And so if you're not going to do it, someone needs to do it. But that's just a kind of an important element of the work, because we talk about, interrelated development, and we talk about how, each area or domain kind of influences the other ones, and how social emotional learning is just so important in the field. And Kimochis as one curriculum is like a strategy that can be used. But there's many out there, maybe not as thorough or as heavily used in the Bay Area. But even just like looking at the little stuffies behind you, all the characters, kind of make me smile a little bit.
I'm glad.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite character?
I do. So let me go ahead and bring one right now. I'm bringing like 3, but okay. So
you can't just have one. You got to have 3. You are the Kimochis lady.
Well, I'm a blend of a cat and a hugtopus. That's me personally.
Okay.
Cat's your leader, type A, kind of struggles to work in the group, tends to be of the camp of my way or the highway. So I tend to be kind of controlling in that way. And hugtopuses are your larger than life, like when they come into the classroom, it's like, I'm loving life, and just, are ready to learn. They're just so excited. And so I tend to be a pretty loud, pretty alarming presence. Sometimes I have a flair for pediatrics. The one I probably is not like me at all, and is probably my favorite, is our bugs. Our bugs are the introverts. They're the ones that are very slow to warm up, very, very observant. The reason why the bugs really resonate with me is the bugs in our classrooms, or the bugs in our lives, but particularly the bugs in our classrooms, tend to be the ones that slip through the cracks. They're the ones whose voices are not heard because they're very, 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 very shy. And they're very scared. Let's see. Scared of trying new things. They're perfectionists by nature. And so they're very fearful of making mistakes, especially in front of a group of people. And so oftentimes they're misunderstood and often get left out of activities as a result, because of their trepidation, their fear, their anxiety, their shyness. And so one of the things that Bug teaches is, it's okay to feel scared, to try new things or be fearful of making a mistake. It's okay to feel shy because you don't want to do this in front of people, or maybe you're not comfortable with the people you're around. But, your teachers are going to show you how to put that brave in front. And so I like that visual of, putting your brave in front. And so I do love that with this particular character, because again, that's so not me. I probably was a bug as a student, But just really empowering our students, especially when you have students with speech and language needs, some of our English language learners, just the ones that don't have a voice in the classroom, really empowering them to have a voice in the classroom and make sure that everyone in the classroom feels like they should be included.
And they're part of that environment. Makes me think, or a little bit earlier today, I was at a school site or a program with toddlers, and a few of them were very shy when I came in because I was a new person and a new face. And so it was really cool to see the teachers sort of walk them through and introduce me and kind of, name that it's okay to feel like name being shy, and it's okay, you're feeling, oh, you're turning your back, you're not really sure who this person is, and just basically walk through the conversation. So there's ways that you can have these conversations with different ages and based off of the individual child needs. And so I think having,
and I love the validation that you shared in your example too, that these teachers, I mean, regardless of what their SEL training was or is, that they already knew to kind of accommodate a student who, like, come on, it's just Miss Maryssa, and not like invalidate that for a student, because it is scary. You're a new person. You have a beautiful face, but you're new.
Yeah, and I'm wearing sunglasses, I'm wearing a mask, and they're just like, who are you? And I'm tall, I'm like a grown up. So it's like just like totally different. I think it was important that they like sort of validated that. And so there's different ways to do social emotional learning. And I think, having a tool like Kimochis could be really great, but there's other things that people can be doing to name, to describe, to validate kids' feelings is really important.
I think that's going to be important, especially when you're in special ed. I always say with Kimochis, I love Kimochis, but I don't promote a sense of fidelity when using or implementing Kimochis. I don't say like, don't use the other stuff you're using, because you must use Kimochis exclusively. In special ed, you have to be using multiple modalities because you've got an eclectic group of learners. And so whatever works, whatever you can add to your bag of tricks, use it. And Kimochis is adding to your bag of tricks.
I love that. We talk about our toolkit or bag of tricks. So I like that. Yeah. So we're kind of nearing the end of the conversation. So I'm wondering if there's anything else that you wanted to kind of share today with potential or current students, teachers, or if there's anything else that you kind of wanted to mention and like you forgot. Or anything else that, you want to leave us words of wisdom.
I mean, I would say just in general, when you go out into the field, really align yourself with people who continue to be humble, who want to be lifelong learners like you, kind of always do a check, because I do think, I mean, as much as we want to keep teachers in the field, if you do get to that place of complacency where you think you know more, really evaluate things, because I do think that can have some pretty serious ramifications or consequences for children when you are dealing with a jaded teacher or an educator who's pretty rigid, especially if you're in special ed, I think that's huge. A lot of people want to make proclamations about being child-centered, but child-centered does not involve rigidity.
You have to be flexible. Flexibility. We're talking about flexibility all the time. So
really align yourself with those people. I mean, and like pay it forward. I think like if you have something, hopefully people don't have an ego about sharing. I mean, everyone always benefits from the shared resources that you may have, and you have a brilliant mind, share your brilliant mind with others.
I love that. That's a good collaborative kind of space to be in. And I like the humility aspect of it. So, well, this has been a great talk. Really appreciate you taking some time out of your day. Sounds like it's been a busy day for you. So, I'm sure students will get a lot out of this, as I have. And just thank you for taking some time.
Thank you.
All right, Eileen. We'll talk to you later. Bye.